Hi, my name is Jamie Lynch, and you are listening to Eating Habits, my podcast about everything restaurants. I will explore the human element of the hospitality business, and I'll talk to the who's who in restaurants, explore their stories, and hear what's on their minds in the ever-changing landscape of the food and beverage industry. Hey there, listeners! Welcome to another episode of Eating Habits. This week, I talk with Brian Baxter from the Catbird Seat in Nashville, Tennessee. I got to tell you, Brian invited me into the Catbird Seat to have a tasting menu after we recorded this episode. I got to tell you, the food was incredible. There were a couple dishes that I just couldn't even wrap my mind around. Man, they are doing such a killer job there. I highly recommend this experience to anybody who's in Nashville. I think Brian is one of the most creative, cerebral, and focused chefs in the market right now. I mean, his food was so precise and thoughtful, thought-provoking. It was just a really excellent experience all the way around. Also, I think it's great. It's a small restaurant. They seat about 20 guests at a time for each seating twice a night. So it's a very intimate environment where the cooks and chefs actually serve the guests, discuss the food with them, interact. It's an all-around and awesome experience, and I hope that you guys enjoy this episode. We didn't waste a whole lot of time getting into Brian's history. We kind of dove right in to the creative process, his approach to food. We talk a lot about his ethos in the kitchen, mentoring cooks, and just how he approaches writing his tasting menu. Thank you. Enjoy the show.
What's up? This is Brian Baxter, and you're listening to Eating Habits.
Great job, chef.
Thanks. I've been practicing.
Yeah, I'm glad to finally have you in the hot seat.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. So we met, 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago at the Nashville Chef's Feed weekend. They brought in like a bunch of chefs from all over the country. I came from Charlotte or Charleston or whatever. You, I think, came from Atlanta at that point.
Yep.
You were working with Kevin Gillespie at Gun Show.
Cold beer.
You were. That's right.
Yep, we opened cold beer.
Did you work at Gun Show?
I did recipe testing there, but
Okay.
I wasn't actually.
You weren't
employee.
on the. Gotcha. All right, cool. So we met at that, and then a lot has happened since then. Not to mention the pandemic, but you've moved around quite a bit.
Yep.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So during, not to jump ahead, but during the pandemic, we were all furloughed. I was actually driving back from a dinner I did with Chino at Huss Savannah. Mm-hmm. And it was March 12th. It was my birthday. And it was like listening to the radio was like already kind of eerie.
Yeah.
Down there was eerie because there was like some National Guard kind of movement.
Yep.
But it was early on. It was
so
right
new.
there, right?
Nobody really knew what was happening yet.
Yeah. So I eat at Chili's every year for my birthday. It's like my thing.
All right. We're going to have to go into some detail about that.
Yeah,
but go ahead. Tell your
back.
story.
But my mom had driven up from Florida, and the plan was to go get dinner at Chili's, and we had the baby, in March. I guess he was probably almost a year at this point. By the time I got back from Savannah to Atlanta, they were like, we should just order it to go. We shouldn't go out to eat. And that was kind of like the first realization
that something
might be
big
weird.
was coming.
Yeah.
So you were at Colbert at that point.
Yep.
And so what happened for you guys for that?
So we weren't sure what we were going to do. We had some kind of talks about different takeout options, trying to manage that way. Mm-hmm. And then, we kind of woke up to an email. We were supposed to go in on Tuesday, and we were all emailed that, everybody was going to furlough and we were going to close for now.
Yeah.
And that was kind of like a national thing, I think, for everybody. So, closed for about a month. Kevin and Marco, his business partner, they were both kind of doing some meal prep stuff for families that, kids that were unable to go to school who, it's kind of their only meal of the day sometimes.
Yep.
So they were doing that. When they started to rehire people, I had already been kind of talking to Josh Habiger and Max. Josh reached out to me and was like, hey, would you ever move back to Nashville? And I was like, yeah, I missed it. I said I would love to. And he's like, well, you know, we're looking for someone to run the Catbird Seat. Is that something you're interested in? And it's something that I had always been interested in. You know,
I think most chefs have fantasized at some point. I know I have been like, ooh, that's a cool concept. I'd like to do that.
Yeah. So
you'd already had a seed in there that you were like, oh.
Yeah, I mean, when I was at Husk, I was just like, man, it'd be awesome to get to do something like that, to get the opportunity to actually run the Catbird Seat one day, just because of what it is. So, yeah, I was like, yeah, that'd be awesome. So we started chatting a bit, and, you know, at this point, nobody's working. We don't know what's going on. My original plan was to give Kevin 2 years and then see how things were going, see if we liked Georgia, and go from there. But when Kevin reached out to me on kind of how everything was going to be rebranded and restructured in the company, you know, I told him about the opportunity at Catbird Seat. He's like, you should do that.
Yeah.
So, you know, he felt, I think, bad about everything that had happened, even though it wasn't his fault. But he's like, you know, I moved your family down here and this happened, but, you know, it's not something anybody could plan for, you know.
Totally. I know exactly how he feels.
Yeah.
That's a rough I don't think people realize that as being an owner operator, like having to pull the trigger on those kinds of decisions where like you're not at fault. It's not your business that's an issue. It's like there's something going on that's like, and it's like a safety thing, and you have to lay people off. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's just out of your control.
Yeah, so that's super unfortunate. I don't want to get too deep into your past because I think it's well documented, and I'll preface it at the beginning of this episode. But you'd been in Nashville, so you worked for Sean at McCrady's in Charleston, and that's kind of how you first got introduced to Nashville, right?
Right.
You were part of the opening team at Husk, Nashville, and that was a big opening. Like I remember when they were expanding here. That was that was 2013. 13.
Yep.
I mean, everybody was talking about that shit. I mean, Sean was like the hottest shit on the planet at that point, like with McCrady's and the first Husk opening in Charleston, and just like what he was doing. I think shortly before that, he was on Mind of a Chef or something like that.
We
right?
filmed Mind of a Chef opening week, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but he had been on.
Shit.
You know, he had been on an episode of Bourdain with the Cook It Raw guys. With,
right.
I mean, all the best chefs in the world at that time.
Yep.
We had done a couple events with like Ben Shuri, Daniel Patterson, Magnus Nielsen, like all these guys were starting to come over. So like,
and was that part of the Mind of a Chef thing? Like, because they were all kind of.
I think that was all before Mind. You know, that was all before Mind of a Chef.
Yeah.
And I don't know how that got kind of started, but I remember him showing me an episode for a TV show a pilot they filmed, which wasn't Mind of a Chef, but
yeah.
So there's definitely stuff brewing, like while I was still at McCrady's, and we already knew that we were moving to Nashville. But I don't really know the inner workings of all.
Yeah. Well, what was it like working with Sean during that time? Because I mean, he was. I would consider him to be a hyper celebrity at that point.
Yeah.
Right. Like everybody knew his name. He was definitely doing something new and fresh. And he was pushing the envelope for Southern. Just awareness, like Southern cuisine awareness and stuff.
Yeah.
As well as just being an outstanding, like super methodical, technical chef. And so he was kind of like a superstar. What was it like to be working in kind of with that group? Because also like the team that he had was fucking super badasses. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
I mean,
everybody
Dano and Jeremiah.
Yep.
Jeremiah from the Dabney.
Yep.
John Sleesman, who ran McCrady's when they went to the tasting counter. He's at the bar at Willett. Andrew and Nate are both out at South Hall Farms now. Our buddy Kyle's in Nebraska. He was incredible. Sean Nealon was a pastry chef, and he ended up at, I think, Qua and a couple places. He opened in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And he's baking bread now. I'm trying to think. JJ Basil was like our R&D chef for a while.
That's awesome.
And he's like the one who like really
figured out. What was that experience like for you?
To me, it was incredible because
you were a pretty young. You were a young cook at that time.
Yeah,
so,
well, it's funny because I don't know if you remember Sean's podcast. Or sorry, his blog, Ping Island Strike.
I never.
So he had this blog. So that's how I knew about Sean, was
Okay.
through my old chef. Was he had this blog, Ping Island Strike, and there were a lot of other chefs that all had these blogs at the same time. You know, like John Shields when he was at Townhouse.
Yeah.
This guy Chad Zilla in Miami. So Sean was doing like a lot of the hydrocolloid stuff with Southern food, which I think we were all drawn to. By the time I got there, most of that was done.
Yep.
And it was like more focusing on, you know, the heirloom grains, you know, bringing these seeds back that had been almost completely extinct, you know, with like, he handed me 11 field peas or it was a rice pea. He's like, took me, you know, 3 years to collect all 11 of these seeds. Like, don't fuck this up.
Right. You're like, oh shit.
I said, okay.
This guy's like,
Yeah, he's like, if you push it too deep, it's not going to sprout. If it's too shallow, the bird's going to eat it. The future of Southern food is in your hands.
Yeah.
And he just walked out. And I was
love
like,
it.
Oh, man, oh, crap.
I love it.
Well, they grew.
Yeah.
Whew. Yeah.
Pass that test.
But it's like, I've never farmed before, and I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But, you know, we were taking, you know, Sea Island red peas and learning how to make shoyu from them and vinegars and all the stuff that he talks about, you know, kind of in his show. And, you know, was really what we were doing. And it was cool because I had never been exposed to that before. So it really gets your mind going with, especially when you move to Husk and it's like everything has to be from the South. Like, if there's an ingredient we want to use, like if we want gochujang, we got to figure out how to make it ourselves, or you know, whatever.
Yeah. You're not buying like cases of crap.
Yeah.
You know, you're like, okay, we need to make that.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
So that was,
you see it led into like fermentation and like all that kind of.
Yeah, charcuterie was a big thing that Abacrates and that Travis was doing at Husk there. So that continued on. But it's a lot of pressure because all this attention was on Sean. So the expectation's high with the opening.
Right.
You know, so filming a TV show, rearranging the kitchen, prepping for the show, and to make sure all these cooks that have never worked with us before are ready for service.
Yeah.
Making sure the expectation's the same, trying to get them on the same page as what we expect, which was a little more intense back then, you know, like it was 2013, so it's a little different.
What was that like? Tell us. That's what I'm curious about. Like, I mean, I understand a little bit of that pressure, you know, but not like that.
Yeah.
You know, and I can imagine that it was pretty high octane.
Yeah,
in that kitchen. I mean, you guys probably well caffeinated and
100%
fueled.
Yeah, little sleep and lots of caffeine.
Yeah.
I'm pretty mellow, but I played football for a long time, so I'm also pretty intense in that I switch pretty quick.
Yeah.
So I don't want something to not be right because Sean's not going to go say something to somebody else like, why isn't this right?
Yeah.
He's going to come to me and ask me why it's not the way it's supposed to be.
Right.
And, you know, coming up in kitchens when you're younger, it was much more intense and a little bit different on how
aggressive.
you could treat, which I think, you know, there's like a balance of managing out of fear and out of, you know, I guess respect from both sides.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I probably to this day still, if Sean came in to eat, would be like afraid to disappoint him.
Right.
You know, but that's kind of always what I've known. You know? I never wanted to disappoint my dad. And you know, Sean's kind of like, I feel like you're whichever chef you have worked for you know, I've worked for him longer than anybody else. So there's that same level of respect. But there's also that fear of like, I don't want to get jammed up because I messed up. But then also it's not like, I'm not afraid to get yelled at.
Sure.
But I'm afraid of the disappointment, if that makes sense.
Totally.
And I don't think it's like that anymore.
Yeah. I don't know.
For most chefs.
Yeah. Well,
Not for me, but for most cooks, young cooks coming up.
Yeah.
Because it's this like this expectation that I'm going to graduate culinary school.
Just put the pin on.
Yeah.
I'm the guy.
I think I know everything, and if chef yells at me, then he's just an asshole.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, you're not listening. You're not doing your job properly, and I've told you what to do, and it's not. So I have to find a way to get through to you, and if it's fear, then it's fear.
I want to talk about this because I myself have had to navigate this minefield.
I'm sure.
You know, I came up under Danielle Ballud and Andrew Carmelini and Charlie Palmer, and these guys were pretty aggressive chefs. Now, they were always hyper supportive if you were a fucking badass and doing your stuff, and like, if your mise en place was correct and you were focused during service, like they were fine. If you were a slacker or fucked around, like you would get blasted. I actually have a great story. I don't know if I've told it on the podcast. I should tell it about working for. I'm gonna blast Michael Mina right now.
Okay.
So Michael was the first Michelin level 4-star chef I worked for at Aqua in San Francisco, and I was an intern. So I was there. I got sent there by this master chef of France to do my internship. So I was like, I'm not fucking up. Like I'm gonna be there doing whatever. But I was also like this little punker kind of like jerk off. So like the whole crew, we did like 450 covers a night, right? Just pounded, and everything's a la minute. And I was working in the Garde Manger. We had 2 services. It was like the first service, and then like we'd flip and then have a second service. And so we'd all funnel out into the alley and like just chain smoke a cigarette like as fast as you could and get back to your station and get ready to go. Well, this particular night, I was the last one filtering in. I was like puffing that second cigarette, and everybody kind of filters into their stations and is like resetting. And the food runner sticks his head out, and then he called me Rodman because he's like a super Lakers fan, and I was all tatted up, so he called me Rodman because I had like fucking piercings and shit, and he was just like, so he tells the food runner, he goes, go get Rodman. So the food runner sticks his head out, and he's like, Rodman, Michael wants to see you. I was like, oh, fuck. So I throw my cigarette down, I go in there, and I try to like slide by him on the line to get to the Garde Manger, and he just like stops me. And he's a big dude. He's like 6'2" or something.
Yeah.
He's like this little shit. And he just starts fucking blasting me, like screaming in my face, like spitting on me about like, what did I learn in the alley? Like, what am I doing out there jerking off all day? Like, what did you learn out there smoking cigarettes? Like, blah, 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 blah. And then he rips the pocket off my chef coat, like just tears it off and shoves it in my hand. And I'm literally like tears are starting to come down my face. And I'm a fucking punk, like I'm a hardcore kid, right? Yeah. And and the whole team's just got heads down. Like, and I just moped back to the Garde Manger in the shit and just had the most humiliated service. Like, and from that point on, I was like, all right, I'm never going to be that guy again. And I kept that pocket and put it in my internship, like manual or whatever I turned in. I was like, that's what happens in badass kitchens.
Yeah.
We can't do that anymore.
No. So that's the thing is like how to, I got spanked 3 times that I remember growing up as a kid. And after the 3rd time, I said, you know what? I'm just gonna start listening. I'm not gonna disobey anymore.
Right.
I don't know how someone has that. It's just different.
Yeah.
Now. Like how do you get? Like we all have that moment. Like, oh man, I remember this reaction. I do not want to see that reaction again.
Mm-hmm. So how do you navigate that? So I've had to do that. Like Five Church, when we opened Five Church, that was my first executive chef position. I was a CDC for multiple people. I'd run kitchens before, but I was never like the guy, and I didn't have a mentor at that point to like be like, hey, this is how you run a team. This is how you are the chef, and I kind of had to figure that out, and I was not very good at it because I had a chip on my shoulder and a lot to prove too, and I wanted to do it my way. And so I kind of dug into those experiences, so I was pretty aggressive like the first couple of years we were open. And at some point I realized like this, first of all, I am fucking miserable. Like I'm leaving service and I'm like, I'm upset because I lose my temper. Mm-hmm. I'm acting like a raging animal, like I'm angry, and I have to like do something to like combat that frustration and anger because service didn't go the way I wanted or whatever. And so it was like an internal thing where I was like, this has got to stop. Like I'm not getting what I want out of my team, first off, so it's exacerbating my, behavior, and I don't feel good. Like this is supposed to be like my pride and joy and like my crown jewel and like my achievement, and I feel awful, acting this way. And so it took a long time to kind of figure that. Like that was the first step, right? Is being like, okay, I need to change this what I'm doing, and that took years, and I'm still working on it, obviously, but. What was your approach? Like, what was your experience? Was the Catbird Seat your first executive chef position, or?
Husk, I took over as CDC. Well, yeah, executive chef. Took over CDC at Husk in 2014.
Okay.
I quit drinking in 2015. So that was one thing when I hate brunch.
Uh-huh.
So, coming into
Husk,
brunch.
And Husk gets pounded for brunch.
So
right?
busy. And then you get pounded again for dinner 2 days in a row. So
that's rough.
For me, I think the biggest thing I learned at Husk was how to manage different people and how different people. Some people like to get yelled. Now I don't want to be yelled at.
Yep.
But when I was younger, like I would take it. I would have worked for Gordon Ramsay in a heartbeat. There's times where like you're like pissed off and like I just want to hit this guy. Like I don't understand. There were times at McCrady's where like the level of expectation was so high they would just look for something wrong on your station if you were having a good night, just to remind you like it has to be perfect. Yeah. But it's the same thing out of respect. Like I know it's nothing personal in the kitchen, so there's times where you get frustrated, but after service, like it's water under the bridge. Just just shake it off. And I have, I get really pissed off, but 5 minutes later I've moved on. Yeah. But I think I learned how different people respond, and then I'm still working on my patience, especially with 2 kids, but not being hungover at 8 a.m. definitely made it a little bit easier for me to not be so frustrated. But also I think like as I've gotten older, as you get older, it's different.
Yeah. You can't bounce back either.
Yeah.
Was your decision to quit drinking because you had a drinking problem, or was it more like your relationship to being?
I think it's my relationship with people and myself, my overall health.
Yeah.
Like I said, I have a short temper, so if somebody said something to a friend of mine at a bar, I was quick to,
Yeah.
What'd you say?
So, you're a bit of an instigator.
Yeah. I don't like people messing with my friends. So it's just kind of like I wanted to feel better. I wanted to get in shape. I didn't want to not be able to control myself in instances with relationships or even friends or out in public. Mm-hmm. And then also being a hardcore kid, getting tattooed all the time by my buddy Ryan and Straight Edge. We're talking a lot, and I just one day was like, I remember waking up one day and be like, I'm not drinking anymore. That was it.
My day for that was after that chef's weekend. No shit, dude. Like that weekend was fucking brutal.
It was, yeah.
And I'm a really good drinker. Like I can drink a lot of a lot of different stuff. Mm-hmm. But I have a quick temper too, and I can get kind of aggressive and like whatever. But when I got back to Charlotte after that whole weekend, it was a great weekend. I had a blast, but consumed a lot of booze. Like I was drinking a lot, and I felt it at the end of that weekend. I was just like run down, frustrated. It's not 100, and so I talked to my now fiance, she was my girlfriend then. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna take a month off. Like I did one of those things, right? Mm-hmm. I just need to like clear my head and get straight, and I just never went back. And I stopped drinking, and like in the first couple of weeks kind of sucked because I was like one of those habitual drinkers, Mm-hmm. It was like my nightcap medicine thing. Yep. Like just always had a glass of wine or whatever. I wouldn't get shit faced. I just like always had a glass of wine or something at the end of the night. And so after I got over that habit part of it and started feeling better, like my mind got clear, and I was like, holy shit, like what the fuck? Yeah. And now I'm a huge proponent for like all my team too. I'm like, just control your shit. Like you don't have to be sober or whatever. Like do what's right for you. But like the way we were partying, I think probably the way you were partying back in the day is like you're just in a haze all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And it was like, it's Monday night. Let's go.
Yeah, football's on.
Yeah, let's find something to do. And I just like have never been a homebody. Yeah. But like except for on like certain things like Sunday, I want to like go. I'll wake up early, go get coffee. When I was single, do whatever, go to church or do whatever, do my stuff, and then it was like, I'm gonna go get some food and then I'm gonna drink and watch football the rest of the day. Yeah. That was it. It's like that was it. It'd be the times with my buddy Cash we called each other roommate. Be like, hey, let's go to Three Crow because it's 2 for 1s. It's 2 p.m. He's like, sorry, it's only 2. Like, he's like, yeah, but if we go now, like, we'll go home at like 7. Yeah. And then at like 11:30, we're like walking down to 308. It's like, oh, it happened again.
Yeah.
but I could still, when I quit drinking, I was able to still go have these interactions and hang out with my friends, and it didn't. I was never like tempted to. And then at first it's kind of like weird because you're going to these places and people expect you to take a shot or order a drink or whatever, and then once
I still get people doing that with me.
Yeah,
they're like, "Oh, I got your shot." I'm like, "Bro,
yeah,
I'm good."
But it was cool because I would
it.
walk into like 308, and one of the guys would have a water with like a bunch of garnish on it and hand it to me. So it got to the point where everybody knew, and it wasn't weird for me. I would just drink a soda water or just hammer like pints of water. Yeah, I would pee more than everybody drinking because I was drinking so much water. So my hydration went up.
Right, which helps your health and your mind work. It was
great.
Like you're just like, wow, I'm like a superhero now.
But I feel like all of that trained me for having kids, where I just I don't sleep anymore either, because like any time during the day I feel like there's always something I have to be doing because I don't have the time.
Right
now with kid, it's like my days just, they never end.
Yeah, when they go to sleep, you're like, oh, I have like 5 minutes.
Yeah,
I better go to the bathroom.
Yeah,
like I better
oh yeah, get them ready in the morning. Like I wake up, I have to like rush to get them breakfast, especially depending on, my son's been waking up early, but if he sleeps late, like if I don't get them there while the kids are on the playground, it's like meltdown.
Yeah,
if they're on the playground, it's like, bye, see you, and they're out. They don't care about me anymore, so I got to get there. So it's like rush, and then I rush to work, or I rush to the gym, rush through a workout, to rush to work, to rush to get everything ready for service. So it's just like this constant. It never stops.
How's that going for you? How are you doing managing that? I feel like you have to be sober to manage that.
Yeah,
like you just go off the rails.
100%. I mean, I'm not working out as much as I'd like to, or we've been short staffed. But one of our guys just got back. He'll be back today, so hoping to kind of get that consistency back with working out, because that's kind of like my outlet, and I can tell when I'm not able, when I'm not able to have my routine, that I get frustrated quicker. I have a short temper. I'm not able to get any of that stuff.
Yep.
Any aggression out any other way. I don't go in mosh pits anymore, because last time I did, I tore my meniscus. So it's like, I can't do it. And I was like,
you're the old man standing
I thought
in the
about
back
it
now, like
I
drinking
thought
water.
about it at a show not too long ago, and I was like, man, I'm almost 40. I can't.
Yeah. Don't do it.
I can't do it.
Don't do
I'm gonna
it.
end up hurting myself.
Yeah.
But now, like, I never understood, like, when you say something to somebody, the answer should just be yes, chef, or no, chef. Like,
yeah,
I don't want an explanation of why you're doing something. I remember doing something one time, I didn't do it. I was getting jammed up about something, and I wasn't the one who did it. And I just said, yes, chef, won't happen again.
Yep.
And then, 6 hours later after service, he's like, oh, hey, so, I know you didn't do that. I apologize for.
Do you have to manage those situations now in the position that you're in your kitchen?
Yeah, I still do.
Because my whole thing on that was always like, I hate it when people talk back. I can't. I'm the same way as you. Like, the chef says something, it's yes, chef. Like, this is your thing. I'm a tool here to help facilitate that. And I remember early on in the 5 Church days, like, people would say, like, or a cook might say, oh, I didn't prep that, I didn't cut that. I'm like, you fucking cooked it.
Yeah, and it's
you
on your
plated
station.
it.
Yeah,
like, that's your responsibility, man. Like, I don't care who prepped it. Like, you're serving it. You're this is a representation of you and your cooking. And now once I send it out, it's a representation of my cooking.
right.
So like I never stood for that. Now that's one thing that would send me like over the edge, like instantly.
Yep.
So it was like, I'm like, I don't want to hear your shit. Like, we're not serving that. That's it.
Yeah. I remember, not to get sidetracked, but one time at McCrady's, I was working fish veg. We had the sweet potato dish. I cooked in like bonito butter, and I was like, I didn't work there the day before, but I was cutting them, and I was like, these are kind of hard. And the guy working fish was like, oh, just start them a little earlier, like when the order comes in, and just cook them through. I was like, okay. So I, kept cutting them, and while we were cooking it was Alex from Ideas in Food and Bonjwing, and Sean comes in, and he's going through everybody's station, and he's going through everything, and he grabs them. He's like, starts setting them on my conversions, raw. So then he doesn't say anything to me. He just goes to Jeremiah.
Yeah.
And then
Was
Jeremiah
he
and
like
Dana
the chef de
just,
partie or something? He was
Jeremiah was the CDC at the time,
Okay.
and Dana was the executive sous.
Yeah.
And they just start
Yeah.
ripping on me. So we're like getting them all back into the butter in the oven, like trying to cook them through. You know, it's just so ever since that, like,
Did the shit roll downhill with in that operation? Was it like it would start with Sean and then it would go down to Dano and then go down to Jerry?
Yeah.
Like, and then it would just filter.
then it
into
would
the
be
guys?
like usually the
or would he
CDP.
like powwow with those guys and be like, "Hey, what's going on here, guys?"
No,
it was like what?
Yeah.
It was like what the fuck?
Yeah. And then, you know, like the chef de partie, whoever's working like meat or fish. Meat was like the kind of the highest, and
Yep.
you know, they start going on everybody too. So that everybody it policed itself.
Right.
So that didn't happen often, but that was the last time like I ever second guessed something not being.
Yeah.
If I didn't think it was right, I was gonna.
You were like, I'm
just
starting
fix
over.
it. I'm just gonna fix it. Yeah.
Smart. So when you have those things happen at Catbird Seat,
Yeah.
how do you manage that now?
Well, I have a couple young guys, and then a couple guys that have been one that's been cooking with me for a long time, and one that's been a chef longer than me. And with the younger guys, usually it's like, why didn't you like? First of all, every time you prep something, let me check it, so we don't have to get to service and it's not right.
Yep.
If you've never done anything, ask questions. I'll make it with you the first time. Like, yeah, I make every recipe the first time we get it going, so you know what to. But like, I can do it with you, make sure it's right, so we don't get the service and it's wrong. And then if you don't understand something or have never done, like just ask. And they're afraid to ask questions, I think.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. I don't know if it's like, oh, I think I can do this, or and it's through different things, not just like recipes.
Do you
and stuff.
think that's a generational thing? Do you think it's the young
I think it's
cooks?
generational, yeah.
Because I always felt like so Andrew Carmelini is the person I work for the most.
Okay.
Right? I met him at Le Cirque and then worked with Danielle with him and all that. And he was like the CDC, and he was my mentor. And he could be difficult to work for. He had very exacting standards, but he was also a cook chef. Like, he was on the fucking line, and like if you were struggling, he was on your station, like cooking you out of the shit. And like, so I had this like immense respect for just like that he can do everything that we're doing. Right. He understands like so much more than I do. And he's my chef, right? He's the guy. And I had never had an issue like asking him, hey, I'm not getting this. Like gnocchi in his kitchen was like only certain people were able to make it, right? Because like he was so particular about it, and I ended up becoming one of those people, and it was because I just watched him do it all the time. He'd be like making gnocchi, and I'm like, oh, fucking over there. I'm like, hey, can I work on this with you?
Yeah.
And he would like show me how to do it. Hey, it needs to be like this and not like that. If the potatoes are like that, this is, and like just working me through the process. And like my cooks don't do that either. Right. Like they're not like, hey chef, I want to ask you about this thing. Right.
Yeah.
It's like very like, there's like a barrier. Do you find that?
I do. Yeah. I mean, I have a couple of the younger guys that are good about like wanting to do more, but I think they want more too fast now. Yes. But they want more, but it's like, understand the foundations and the technique behind something before you try to create something that's brand new. I like the cooks that want to do more and like ask for more, but I also don't want, I learned at Husk, like if you rush somebody, it's we don't have stations at Catbird Seat. Like I give you a couple dishes, like what you pick up. At Husk, it was like if I moved somebody from cold apps or from prep even to cold apps or cold apps to hot apps, which was AM hot apps first, which is busy at lunch because you're pretty much picking up everything.
Yeah.
And they'd be like, oh, I've been working this, like when can I move to Veg 1?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, you're not ready. Well, you throw them on Veg 1 and then they just destroy service and you're like,
that's why
I told you.
Yeah.
And I've seen people where I moved them up too quickly where they just could never recover from that. It was just a downward spiral and they would quit.
Yeah.
So I'd rather make someone wait, and then when they're, instead of, sometimes you got to throw people to the fire, but
sure,
that's when you can tell when someone's ready for like the next step or some more work. But yeah, there's definitely this, I don't know. I would come in on my days off at McCrady's, and when I was working in Orlando, I would come in early to I was really into charcuterie back then, and I would come in and try to just make whatever I could. It was a hotel, so we had rooms where I could have a refrigerator and hide stuff, and
projects to play around with.
And McCrady's had such a program. I would come in on my day off and
just jump in
and help.
Like, what?
Yeah,
you know,
whoever's
what
like,
are we
hey, we're
working
making
on today?
charcuterie on Monday, and I'm off, so
Yep.
come in and work 8 hours and learn how to do it, learn how they do it. I think that's the only way you get better is by putting in the time. It's like if you, like, Tom Brady's not going to be the greatest quarterback ever.
Is he the greatest quarterback?
I think so.
Okay. Is that because
if he wins us another Super Bowl?
Is it because he's with the Bucks now, or because he is?
No, he
legit
is.
He legit is.
But he practiced, like, it's just nonstop. Like, you're always trying to get better. So if you have, it's a sport, but if you have a craft, like, the only way you're going to get better is to, like, commit to it. Mm-hmm. I paint, so I can tell when I because my time is so limited, I don't take enough time to work on basic stuff. I just want to paint every time. Right. And I know the time, like, when I do take time to do these, like, practice skills and different technique things, I can see it in my paintings that they're better each time. Mm-hmm. And if I don't paint consistently, I regress, like 1 step forward, 2 steps. It really is.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same thing with cooking. Like, the only way you're going to get better is to apply yourself. Unless you just want to be a line cook the rest of your life or work, like, in a buffet or something. Right.
There's definitely, I want to talk about the painting because I think that's super interesting and how you apply that to your work. And from a creative standpoint, from a technique standpoint, maybe from a training standpoint. Mm-hmm. But you touched on something, the line cooks, right? There is a breed of people that are line cooks. I think I'm one of those people. Like, I'm an awesome line cook, and I love it. There's bangers, like people that just can get in, that you could throw 30, 40 tickets at them, and they can keep organized and just, like, keep food flowing. And then there are, like, hyper finesse, like tweezer cooks, right? Everything's, like, kind of mise en place ahead and prepped out and, like, it's very exact kind of cooking. And there's, like, this kind of hybrid, right, where people are, like, can line cook a la minute and it can still have finesse, right? And I differentiate the two, but through finesse, because I have both, right? We have a bunch of restaurants, so I get, like, all kinds of cooks, and I love kind of, like, figuring out where people are at and then trying to, like, work on the skills they don't have, right? So if they're a banger who just come in and they're just, like, they're like a middle guy, like, just put him in there, he can do whatever. I work on those people with finesse, right? Because if I can make you if I can improve your technique, then you can be really special, right? Because you can handle volume, you can handle this a la minute cooking, but then you can actually do it at a very high, like an excellent level. But then there's the super creative chefs that can put plates together, but can't handle more than a couple pickups at a time. And so those people, it's like, how do I organize them? And a lot of times it's like, you have to have a little bit of grit to be a line cook. Right. Like, you're not a scientist at that point. It's an organic thing. You can't control the service. Service is going to happen, and how you work within that, is how good of a cook you can be. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that? I know you mentioned somewhere, I heard you say somewhere, maybe an interview or something I was listening to of you, you mentioned something about a la minute cooking and being reactionary as a chef. And can you talk about that a little bit and your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, my first few jobs were, like you said, very busy line cook. So I did my internship at Beacon Restaurant in New York for Walt Maloof.
Oh, yeah.
And that was a busy
That's
restaurant.
all, yeah.
And it was, doubles 5 days a week, sometimes 6. So you're doing lunch and dinner, brunch and dinner. You're responsible for almost everything on your station. There were, like, a few things that one prep guy did. Yeah. But it was usually, like, bulk stuff that didn't really affect saute. Right. And you're just, like, it was this legit saute station. You had, like, I can't remember. I think it was like an 8 range, but, like, you're just pans, like.
You got stacks of hot
roasted duck. You were responsible for that. You'd have to get them on cooking before lunch. You'd have to pull them off after lunch. You'd have to break them down.
Yep.
On top of doing all, which now like probably would be fine, but for your first like serious like line cook job, it's a lot for me. And like it was big. You do 180, 200 for lunch, and then 200 something for dinner, and it's just constantly busy. I go down to Orlando, and it's a restaurant in a hotel, so 500 covered nights were average weekends, and then like a slow night was like 250 to 300.
Right.
And you're just like trying to find places to like let fish rest, because it's like it's so many.
Yeah.
The station they threw me on, like I skipped over. Somehow in my life, I skipped over garmage and hot apps at every restaurant I worked at, and they called it the teppanyaki station there, but it was like a teppanyaki grill that Todd English wanted to cook all the seafood on.
Yep.
And you're responsible for seemed like 40% of the menu came off that station.
Right.
Because there was like a fish of the day, but it was like a option of like 4 different fish. It's just
so you had like 20. You had like 20 or 30 fish on, on order
you'd
any
have
given
like
time. You're
20 Corvina, 20 bass, 15 grouper, 20 salmon.
Yeah.
You have 3 different sauces, but they could add crab or lobster.
Just you're responsible for all that stuff.
Yeah.
You're just trying to keep your stuff straight.
Yeah, and it's just busy every day. You're just prepping your station every day.
Yeah.
But I think it's important. I think everybody wants to do fine dining now, which is cool. Like I get it. I do too. But there's this the skill that's missed out on if you haven't worked somewhere where you have to work quickly. You have to learn to work organized. You have to, like, the prep's one thing. Like, you can prep all your stuff even at like a fine dining restaurant, but if it starts to get hairy in a fine dining restaurant and it's not like a place that has 30 cooks, like,
right,
you got to figure it out. So,
and I think that's the conundrum, right? Is like, so I came up in fine dining, like these mega, fine dining restaurants, but we had 30 line cooks,
right,
working any service, and so now our food is upscale. I don't consider it fine dining because we're kind of like gritty and kind of, our service is a little more casual. We're not stuffy at all, but it's like super upscale food, and we do volume. But in order for us to be profitable, like I have budgets to hit.
Right.
Like I can't have 30 line cooks.
Right.
I can have 6. So how do you do that volume at that level without, when you're not charging $300 a head, for dinner? Like that's a challenge.
And that's how McCrady's was. There were 6 cooks, including pastry, cold apps, and then you would have like 1 sous chef and a chef, except for on like Monday, Tuesdays, and then maybe Sundays. And then Sunday, Mondays, you would just get slammed. It'd be like 20 covers on, and then you just get slammed because everybody industry would come in.
Yeah.
And then you had like a prep guy.
Yeah.
So like, we were cranking out this incredible food. I think that if it's in New York, like this restaurant's 2 stars easy.
Yeah.
And there's, 6, 7 guys in there just grinding, like 4 different menus. It was,
it's hard.
Luckily, I had worked at those restaurants where I just had to figure it out, how to just get it up, make sure it wasn't hammered, and now I could refine. But I had the speed already.
You were used to the
refined,
volume.
Yeah.
You're used to the volume, so you were able to like refine your technique.
Exactly.
And that's awesome.
Yeah, and then going to Husk was kind of a hybrid of McCrady's and Husk, the one here.
Yep.
So it's back to volume. So when I left Husk, going to Bastion was being able to kind of refine and get back to like, where do I eventually want to be?
Which brought you to Catbird Seat.
Yeah, here I am.
We got to talk about it because we were talking a little bit before we started, and we touched on it. So you get offered the job here. You make the move from Atlanta back to Nashville.
Yep.
So the big return. But what was the transition like going from Whole Bear was a big restaurant too, right? That was a monster.
Yeah, it's massive. I think our busiest day was like 800.
Ugh.
Yeah.
So how do you make that move to like a 20-seat tasting menu situation as the executive chef?
Yeah, that's
What was that transition like?
I mean, it was stressful because the expectations are high, like with the people who had worked there in the past. I think anytime you're taking something over and just completely changing, as far as that restaurant's concerned, it's such an overhaul. But there had been such a change between kind of what had been done, 2 chefs before me and then the chefs before me. It was so like opposite ends of the spectrum. And I was kind of going back to what I know, which is, it's just simple food. I just try to make things taste good. And the goal was just like, let's open with, it was during COVID, so let's just get open. Let's manage everything. Let's, we were buying as locally as we could with everything. Kind of just getting open and navigating. And then through the last couple of years has been kind of evolving. And I think really just trying to find like, who am I as a chef? What is my food like? In that direction. So when I do finally leave, it's like, what do I want to do?
Yeah.
So I would say the menu we opened with June of 2020 is completely different than what we're doing June of 2022.
In what way? So like what food were you doing then? And before that, were you ready? Were you in your mind, were you ready for this to take over?
I was ready for the challenge. I wasn't sure what I knew what I wanted to do. I wasn't sure what I was going to be able to get away with. I wasn't sure what I was going to be able to accomplish.
Right.
So maybe I limited myself then, or, and I think it's not like I didn't custom create the space. So there is limitations that come with it. Mm-hmm. But I think I was ready. I don't know if I would say I was cooking after a year, like 100% more confident than I was, coming in.
Yep. So what was your food? What was your food like when you first took over your first menu, and why? And then where do you feel like your food is today?
So I guess it's not insanely different. We've began exploring more ingredients I had never worked with before, hadn't worked much with, just because of being at Huss for so long. Mm-hmm. Kind of January of 2021, as hey, we're gonna be we're open, everything's busy, like we don't have to. And then at a certain point, I always try to support Bear Creek Farms because Leanne and Bill have been so good to me, treated me like family since I've been here. But I realized that I grew up in Florida. I love seafood. I've always wanted to cook seafood and have. At just one point, I was like, "This is a seafood restaurant." Mm-hmm. That So if people ask if there's a lot of seafood on the menu, just tell them, yeah, we have sea urchin and dessert right now. So there's seafood throughout the entire menu. Now we'll do pork and beef, and I do enjoy doing game birds and stuff in the fall and winter. But I think back then it was much more we were just buy as much local produce as we could, because not every restaurant was open, and a lot of the farmers were struggling. They're we had to throw so much stuff away last year. We couldn't even give it away. Yeah. And with that, stuff we had been doing for years, let's turn this into a miso, this into a vinegar, this into a kombucha. Let's just lacto ferment this. We got a bunch of fruit and let's just juice it and throw 2% salt on it. Mm-hmm. And then that became really kind of the base of all our sauces, almost everything, unless it's a classic French sauce. Instead of using alcohol, we're using different fermented
juices and
liquids, paste and juices and things like that to to develop these sauces. And I think that has allowed us to be able to like deliver way more flavor than we were when we first opened. It's just kind of becomes something that's like a part, even more so than we ever did it at Husker McCrady's for me. Just like a basis, like how can I substitute? Like, I would usually use Madeira in this. What do we have that's kind of funky, but we can add
has some sweetness, but got it. And is that part of your toolbox right now? Is that how you think about food when you're creating a dish? Are you like, okay, I've got these like wacky, ferments back here, and I think it will go really good with like a scallop.
Yeah,
right? Like it's got an acidity or whatever, and then you build it from that angle rather than saying, okay, I'm taking a partridge, and I'm going to start with the partridge.
Right.
Or do you like how do you approach what's your creative process?
It's kind of like
now?
What is in season protein wise. So like spiny lobster, I'll use last year's spiny lobster as an example, because it was like something people really enjoyed. So we had a bunch of fermented. So they're coming out of the Keys. So they're anytime they're on, like we're grabbing them.
Yeah.
So, we did fermented pineapple. There was a bunch of pineapple left over, so we fermented it, reduced that down with a little bit of sugar to balance it out, and then made a pineapple ketchup. Mixed those two together, and then we slowly barbecued it, and then served it with like a mayonnaise made with achiote paste, and then like a house-made tahini. It was like very simple, but like people, a little bit of saffron in the pineapple as you cook. It just, I don't know, kind of came together, so it became this thing. And then, taking all the insides of the spiny lobster, we made a garum. So eventually we did another like barbecued spiny lobster dish, later on in the season with a garum made from it was almost like an oyster sauce that we made with, once we thickened it and sweetened it. So you just kind of trying to find ways to like develop more flavor and utilize, like, let's say plums, like green gauge plums, season ended. He's like, I have 20 pounds left. I'm like, screw it, let's buy them.
Yeah.
Buy them, use some of them, and then the ones that are all super ripe, turn those into something, and then next year, or in the winter when there's nothing really available, we'll utilize them. So I like to try to utilize like, 1 to 2 ingredients, but see how many times can I get that ingredient into the dish in different.
Right.
Just to kind of develop the levels and layers.
So does your you want the dish to, this is something interesting I talk to my chefs about a lot, is like developing their cooking voice, right? Like, cause I don't want everybody to be doing what I'm doing, right? Like you guys all have your own experiences that you're coming from, and I want you to like develop that. And so, one thing that I do a lot, I think it sounds like you do a lot too, is that I'll like, there's an ingredient that's usually, it's either a product or a protein or whatever, and it shows up in different iterations in a dish, right? And like for me, in my mind, when I'm creating it, it's about telling the story of that ingredient in this environment, right? Like whatever I'm doing, right? Is that kind of like what you're talking about? Like you'll have different iterations of a product treated different ways, or is it more about the composition of the dish? Like, I think how do I put all these flavors together to make it?
Yeah, I think it's
or does it
maybe
change?
a little bit of both. Yeah, it just depends on the dish. But like, how can I? I'm trying to think of a good example of something. I'll just make something up here, but like if a reduction of like a fermented passion fruit. So yeah, we did a dish with passion fruit cooked down with like shallots. We reduced it almost like a beurre blanc. Would butter it out to order, and then fold passion fruit seeds in it, so it'd be like sweet and sour and salty, and then serve that over skate wing that was just like roasted in brown butter.
Sounds good.
And then there was like a caramelized white chocolate and macadamia and that puree underneath it. So that that's an example. And then I don't mind repeating ingredients throughout a meal as long as they're like it's different each time.
Right.
Because when I ate at Arpege, they use their garden and whatever's in season, and you might have roes like 4 different times, but like one's a rose salt, one's like rose used in a sauce, one's like a pickled rose petal. It's like I think it's okay to repeat these ingredients, especially if something's in season and you're trying to highlight it.
Right.
As long as it doesn't seem redundant.
How often are you changing your menu?
So we do 4 big seasonal changes.
Okay.
But every week, we're changing anywhere from 1 to 3 dishes, just depending on what's available. So we do 13 courses on our first seating and 18 on our late seating. So that allows us, especially the 18, really allows us to play around a lot more.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it kind of depends. And sometimes, like I just had a guy text me like chanterelles didn't land, so I got to figure something out. So it's that also is a challenge of trying to figure out what's available, when it can be here.
And do you guys have like a printed menu that you serve your guests, or is it just kind of
so at the end of the meal we hand out a printed menu.
Gotcha. But it's all a surprise when they sit down.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So they sit down, and it's like the restaurants. Is it mostly like the chef's counter?
Yeah, it's a U-shaped counter, and we have one table in the corner that can seat 4.
Okay. And I haven't been in there yet, so I don't know. Like, so give us the lay of the land. Like, how's the kitchen laid out? So if you're a guest diner coming in to like sit down and eat, what do you see?
Yeah, so you could see the kitchen from any angle. The chefs will be preparing. There's 5 of us right now, so depending on where you're sitting, chefs either preparing something in front of you, or if you're kind of on like the U end of the bar, you have like a view of both sides of everything that's going on. And you have that. I think one thing that people really enjoy is the interaction that we give with the guests.
Are you guys talking to the guests?
Yeah, and people ask a lot of questions. And
cool. So it's not like super quiet, like
no. Okay. And it most of the sometimes people are like some people just don't want to talk. Really, they're quiet, and you that was one thing like you learn, like you figure out like who wants to be talked to and who doesn't, and you kind of figure out the people that want to know more or just want a brief description of what they're about to eat.
Yep.
So it's all kind of like.
It can be interactive, but it's kind of up to you guys to figure out if somebody wants to kind of just enjoy their experience or if they want to be a part of the thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. And then sometimes it's a little like Ed DeBevicky, where like if someone's smart enough.
I don't even know what that word is. Can you use a word that I understand, please?
So there's a restaurant in Chicago called Ed DeBevick's. There's one here, Jack's Last Resort or Dick's Last Resort. Okay. Have you been there?
No.
Where like the servers are just like.
Oh, they're like smart ass.
They're dickheads, yeah.
Yeah, that's part of their shtick.
Yeah. So sometimes, like, depending on how guests are, if they're like joking around, we'll give it back a little bit.
Okay.
Which is fun.
Yeah.
But I think I want to do one night where it's just like Dick's Last Resort, and anytime someone says something stupid, I can just say whatever I want to.
Do whatever wise.
Yeah.
Do you guys enjoy that part of the experience? Because I could see how that would be challenging. Right. I mean, first of all, you're in an open kitchen. That is a totally different environment than I think other other environments. Because the kitchen could be chaotic and crazy. So being in an open kitchen where people can see everything, obviously you got to be meticulously clean and organized and all that. Although you should, anyways, I would argue.
Yeah.
But then that added level of not only can they just see you, but they can talk to you, and then having to add that into your game while you're trying to cook. Do you guys enjoy that? Is it a challenge? Do you hate it? What's going on there?
I think the challenge is learning. I enjoy it, and I think it's what's made part of the experience that we've been offering special to people is that interaction.
Yep.
The challenge is I don't have a problem just walking away from someone while they're in the middle of a sentence to make sure I'm not burning something.
Okay.
But I think, some people have a problem learning how to like work and talk at the same time.
Totally.
And sometimes you have to go over and be like, hey,
yeah,
I don't mind saying in front of the guests, like, yo, finish this now. But that would be the only issue. Now, some people, if you're really shy, then you're probably going to have a hard time
Do you have any shy people on your team?
I have, I have one,
and
for
they
sure.
struggle with some of that.
Yeah. But he does, well, he doesn't really talk to anybody, but he's like, my youngest guy, he's opening up, but he's very quiet and kind of just run the food. And, if guests joke with him and talk to him, you can tell he's like.
Yeah, he gets a little like red-faced and like.
It's funny.
Yeah. I can imagine that being difficult. Although, I mean, so what is the pace like for you guys? Is it hectic? Is it stressful? Is it kind of like fluid and controlled?
Well, everybody seems to think it seems fluid. From the inside, it's fast paced.
It feels like
I mean, because
like, at any moment it's going to come off.
At least for the first 3 seatings, it's like if you don't make those turns, then we're behind all night. So the 5:30, we got to get their first 4 courses down before the 6 o'clock sit. Now 5:30 show up at like 5:50, which happens often where people show up late. He already puts you behind, so you have to like. So we kind of have these marks where it's like, hey, we got to get these down. Once everybody's, when people come in and sit down and they get greeted and we talk about beverage, we'll drop snacks on them and they can be picking at something. And then I don't care like if they have to wait 10 minutes while everybody else sits down before we start getting their meal going, as long as the snack hits. They've already, because that also allows us to buy some time between everything. So we used to do like 6 people sitting every 15 minutes. Now we do half and half every 30, which has made it night and day.
So you're doing your menu and it's like it's broken for each seating is broken into 2 halves. Is that basically? So you do like 10 people,
10 by 10, or
10 by
10.
10. Yeah, okay. And you wait for all those 10 people to be seated and snacked before you start the menu.
Yep.
Okay, got
Now,
it.
if somebody's running late,
Like really late, you might
we got to push them. And then if they show up at a certain point, if they're over half an hour late, if they show up, they have to jump in where everybody is.
Gotcha. Okay, so they miss out on like 1 and 2 maybe or whatever. Gotcha. Okay. That kind of helps do you have like a clock just like going off in your head like the whole service? You're just like, oh shit, like is it just like we got to be here now? Now we got to be here.
I usually know if the main course isn't going out between 7 and 7:10, then we're 15 minutes behind.
Yeah. So you just constantly, it's like the Matrix. You're just like, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. So it's like it's a push, and then once we get the 8:15s up, we got to push to get the. Once we get the 5:30s up, we got to get it cleared and remarked. There's some nights where we get everybody out by 7:45. Yeah. And it's like empty for half an hour. And there's nights where nobody wants to leave.
You like walk around the you're like, look at me, I'm the master of this universe.
But the thing about those nights is like, it's like everybody forgets they have a whole second service to do.
Right. They're like, great job, guys. And you're like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
We're about to get.
Pay attention. Because then now you got 18 courses and it's the same thing. Now we got to rip like 5 or 6 dishes up before the 8:45 sit down, or else it gets jammed up. You know, because if they'll catch up. I mean, they catch up.
Yeah.
But at a certain point, if you don't keep the pacing right, it's like now I'm picking up 2 of my dishes one for 10 and 1 for 12, and so.
Yeah, it can get hairy. Yeah. Are you during the service? Do you work a station? Are you working the pass?
Yeah,
is there a pass, or is it like
there is a pass, but it's kind of like everything comes to the middle on it, except for like small things. And we had only been 4 of us, so I was picking up 4 dishes, and then like if I'm not picking up a dish, I'm usually like cooking a lot of the protein, and then if I have a free hand, I'm helping whoever's like picking something up, like plate.
Gotcha.
Now that we'll be back to like having 5 of us again, and then hopefully back to like fully staffed, we'll, I'll probably do a couple of the dishes, which allows me to be more hands-on with everything and make sure like everything looks right, is going out right, and then
so you'll be responsible for less pickups.
Yeah,
you'll do like 2 pickups so that you can kind of like.
I like cooking though, so that's why
Yep.
I don't want to just give everybody all the dishes and then just walk around and touch everything.
Yep.
So I'll always keep a few dishes, and then it's usually like the new stuff. Like once something's like been going, I'll let someone start working it with me,
Right.
and then it's theirs.
But when it's new, you want to finesse it and play with it and keep it going. Gotcha. How much of the cooking that you guys are doing now is a la minute cooking? Is that like
A lot
kind
of it.
Yeah.
A lot of it. I mean, so like all of our sauces for the most part. Well, no, that's not true. Most of our sauces are like butter sauces that are made. We have a pasta dish right now, which like we just reduce like the mussel cuisson, and it gets mounted with like a foie gras parfait.
Mm-hmm. Foie gras mussels, I like it.
Yeah. Every time I cook the mussels, I throw these like Korean soup like sachets in there.
Yeah.
Because I was doing a Korean dish, and I was like, it smells like foie gras. I don't, like just
Yeah.
the aromatics and everything.
Yeah, the way it kind of combined made you
like,
go.
Let's do foie gras and mussels and see what happens. The people enjoyed it, and we throw like black currants, like dried black currants that we rehydrate in blueberry vinegar, and then like fresh tarragon from our garden
Nice. Interesting.
with pasta.
What dishes are you most proud of?
I think it's the ones that catch people off guard.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we have this dish right now. We have a few weird ones. So like this banana, we burn the entire thing like in the embers and the peel, and then
You got a live fire. What do you got?
we have a little conro grill in there.
Oh, cool.
It just smokes the place out every night, especially if you're cooking like Wagyu or pork or
Something
something.
with high fat.
Yeah.
It's just like.
But it gets like a black walnut toffee, like preserved, like candied green walnuts, like that are like black and just tender because they've been preserved for so long.
Yeah.
And then caviar. And then another caviar dish that's this like fruit called nance
I don't even know
from
what
like
that is.
Central and South America. So it kind of looks like a little orange cherry.
Okay.
But if you eat it fresh, it's kind of starchy and tannic, but it tastes like Parmesan cheese rind and like pineapple.
Oh, weird.
So we cook that down into a jam and then brulee like an Epoise style cheese.
What happens to it when you cook it down? Like, what is it like?
It does firm up, so like you have to chew it. But we cook it down with sugar and vinegar, like a
balance
ratio. Yeah. So it just concentrates the flavor, but it still tastes like
It still has that weird like Parmesan.
Yeah.
Like.
Yeah, it tastes like a pineapple, like dum dum kind of, or the
Cool.
tropical.
Yeah,
dum-dum
yeah,
kind of
that's
thing.
interesting.
And then we take all the pits, since like you got to punch them out like a cherry puncher. And we make a cheese out of that, or we call it a cheese. So it's cooked down with coconut and cocoa butter, and then let that infuse, and then press it, and then that gets shaved over the top, so it looks like cheese. And then like a real cheesy caviar.
Nice.
So it's like we're not just putting like both of our caviar dishes are used for like salinity in the dishes.
Right. They're not the focal point of the dish. They're an accent for whatever. I like doing that too. Yeah, I don't know that I've ever put a caviar dish on a menu. Like it's always been accompanying something.
Right.
Like adding like I love the oceanic part of caviar. Like the salt is like always great, but that kind of like it doesn't taste like seafood, right? It doesn't taste like fish. It has just like this oceanic, like briny thing going on that I love. Like I love it, and I could use it anywhere. And I never used to like it. Like when I worked at like Aqua, so working at Aqua in San Francisco with Michael, like that restaurant, the year that I was there was like something reported where we sold more foie gras per pound than any other restaurant in the world. Like it was, I mean, he did like whole roasted fucking lobes of foie gras, like 10 or 12 a night. People would order like for like $400 or $500. People were just crazy there. They're like, oh yeah, whole roasted foie gras. I was like, that is disgusting.
Yeah.
That poor guy like that worked that station would just he's like, fuck me. Like
They don't roast quickly.
No, they take time and if you don't do it, like there's so much finesse that goes into cooking it properly.
Yeah.
Right. Because like it leaches its fat, like, and then it becomes like, now it's stewing. It's not searing. So it's like, you really have to manage it, and he would just get hammered with these things. But anyways, and just so much caviar. Like there's like caviar everywhere, like pounds of it a day.
Was he doing the trios then, or was that?
Yeah, the trios, and we also had this caviar parfait thing that we did, which was basically like a bow round, like on the bottom, and it had like all the layers of like caviar garnish like stacked inside of a mold, and then like almost a full. I mean, it had to be an ounce and a half or 2 ounces of caviar like on top, and you like had to. It was a fucking pain in the ass, but like we sold 30 of those a night.
Yeah,
so that's like that's over 2 pounds of caviar.
That's insane.
You know what I mean? Just like on one dish. So it was just crazy the amount, and I never liked it.
Have you been to Locust yet?
I haven't.
He puts
Yeah.
a lot of caviar.
Does he?
Yeah, you gotta go.
All right, I'll go because I can get
If
down
you like
on it.
caviar,
I do now. Like then I hated it just because my palate sucked, and and that was the other thing too. Is like when I was a young cook, like I remember, and I want to ask you about this, about how your palate's developed, and then we can go into painting a little bit too, because the palate is there.
I like that.
But like when I was a young cook working in New York, you know, I was fascinated with kitchen life. Like that's what got me, right? It was like this high octane, like Anthony Bourdain thing, right? Like when I started cooking, chefs were like doing drugs on the line and just like grinding it out. I was like, fuck yeah, I'm a pirate. Let's do this, right? And but my palate sucked, and like I didn't even eat fresh tomatoes until I worked at, I think, Le Cirque in New York, because I had never had like a farm fresh tomato, right? Like I never
You
liked
had the
it.
grainy ones in the
Yeah, like
Taco
from
Bell taco that you scoop off because they're terrible.
Exactly. I was like, this fruit is
tomato?
fucking disgusting.
Yeah.
I was like, why do people eat this thing?
Yep.
And I think when I was at Le Cirque, Andrew had introduced me to like an heirloom tomato. He's like, hey, try this tomato. I was like, I don't eat tomatoes. He's like, okay, first of all, he's like, if you ever tell me no again, he's like, we're done here. Like, I'm going to ask you to taste shit and you're going to fucking taste it. And I was like, yes, chef. I was like, sorry. You know, I was like, hold up. Who am I?
Yeah.
And he's like, try this. Right. And it was just like a freshly cut tomato with some like flake salt on it. And it was like a juicy, acidic, sweet, like a beautiful tomato. Right. And I was like, holy shit, what is this? He's like, it's a tomato. And I was like, I don't, like, you're blowing my mind here. Right. And I think back to that now and I'm like, I remember when I like, didn't know what flavor was, and I didn't know, and I was so narrow-minded as to my approach to my palate and what I would eat. Now I'll try anything, right? Like that's part of the fun is like, and there's still things I don't like. Like I won't eat a tomato in the wintertime, period. Like I just don't do it.
Right.
You know, I'll get San Marzano tomatoes in a jar, and that's better for me than a tomato, like a fresh tomato in the winter. How were you always an eater? Did you become, what was your approach to, and what is your palate like now?
I was always an eater, but I didn't try a ton of different things. My grandmother cooked dinner for us a lot, so she had like this rotating like 14 dishes that they didn't change. They just rotated every couple weeks.
Yep.
You know, I started when I first started working in restaurants, when I really started trying different things. My first job in high school was as a food runner at this restaurant called the Wine Cellar, and it ended up being like my first kitchen job too before I went to CIA. And it was continental cuisine. So you had like rack of lamb, Chateaubriand, Dover sole, all table side.
Yeah, the classics.
So sick. You had...
and now Sean's doing all that shit at the Continental.
Yeah, I
love it.
I love the old school stuff. The first time I had Bernays, like Marchand de Vin sauce. They did veal and chicken. What's it called? Schnitzel.
Like the
With
Meunier.
like they did like anchovy caper lemon wedge garnish. They did tomato roses on the scampi. Dude, it was so old school. Baked Alaska table side. Yeah. And then on Mondays they did like a continental buffet where they just took all the leftovers and turned it into stuff. So I really
think I'm
tried
the only chef that tornade on Top Chef.
Really?
Like my first day, I was like, because it's the one thing I knew how to do.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm just gonna tornade everything because like I'm really good at that.
Yeah, there you go. Just rip them out.
I love the classics, man. That's like my thing.
But it's like, it was cool because like I may have had eggplant parmesan before, but I don't know. I had it there.
Right.
I never had Spätzle before. You know, all these different cream sauces they were making, like take leftover like salmon and cook it down, and they made their own gravlax. The sous chef Zeke made everything. So it's just like cool. Like that was the first time I was really exposed. I was like, this stuff tastes good.
Yeah.
Now I didn't have like a tomato that the first time I ate a tomato and was like, I could just eat this was in Nashville.
Yeah.
It was like the best tomato I'd ever had. Not saying that there weren't better ones out there, but I had never had one
that like spoke
before
to you.
then.
Yeah.
Then I was like, I get it.
Yeah.
And I use them in summertime. I love them. We'll juice a bunch of them. We'll ferment tomato juice, green and like heirloom, and we'll use it throughout the year. Like reduce it down with sugar.
You just keep that like in bottles, like sitting around, like in your pantry,
or just vacked and frozen, you know.
Yeah.
And then once you make that reduction, it's like almost like a molasses with like a tomato molasses that's got this like lactic acid umami flavor to it.
Funky.
But you know, like I had this conversation with one of my cooks the other day because he's like, I don't eat lettuce, and I was like, well, what if you go to get a job interview and the chef asks you to make him like the best salad you've ever had, and you don't know what to put with it because you don't know what this kind of lettuce tastes like.
Yeah.
Like he hands you arugula, you don't eat it, so you don't know that it's bitter, and you don't balance it, and like or like radicchio or something. Like you have to taste stuff because that's how you develop, you know, this flavor library in your head of all these things that taste good. When I was young too, the Flavor Bible, I think it was called, is a really good book.
That's a great book.
To like, if you don't really know what goes with something. Because you have, like, now I try to expose myself to weird things. Like, I'm about to put a durian dessert on.
Funky, man.
Yeah. So
double glove when you touch that stuff, man.
So, like, I'm, you know, like, I'm now trying to utilize things and expose myself to things I'd never had before.
Yeah. How much time do you spend playing with new stuff?
Well, it's like I was, like I had been talking about kind of the reactionary thing. Is like, I'll get something in, I'll taste it, and then like force myself to create it. Yeah. Because if I take too much time and I play around with it, and it might evolve, but like I've realized like I take this time to think I have this idea and it's going to be incredible, and it ends up not being what I want, and I get more frustrated than just reacting and letting like my palate and like, you know, kind of like other senses like work and just do their thing.
I like that. You don't have a set dish in mind that you have to achieve necessarily.
Right.
When you start the process, you're kind of like, okay, it's going to be whatever, some fruit, right? And you're kind of like, I think this is a cool idea, and you start with it, and then it just kind of evolves, and you just let it go, rather than say, hey, okay, it's going to be, you know, this grilled steak with this funky fruit, whatever. You kind of, if that doesn't work, you're able to pivot and just kind of like roll with it.
Right.
Yeah.
So like,
are you constantly tweaking dishes? Even like kind of like are you tweaking dishes that are on the menu today? Like, hey, you know what? The way we did that yesterday, I'm a little like.
It depends. Some of them yes, some of them no.
Gotcha. Some of them you get right, and you're like.
Some of them it takes us like a few, like we'll put it on, and then we get feedback for like the first week, and then I'll go home and just kind of be like, do I need to change anything? Yes, or you know, like we'll tweak it. Yeah. I've only had to like once or twice like tweak something in the middle of service. But I think like if things are constantly trying to make it better or figure out how we can make it better. Yeah. But like I had a mussel dish on before, and we had a bunch of leftover pulp, so we made like essentially took cantaloupe pulp and made kimchi out of it.
Funky.
And I was like, what can we do with this? And I was like, oh, let's do this like Korean mussel soup, but like make it more of a sauce. Grill the mussels, cover it in the sauce, and then we took fresh melons and dressed them in would let them like marinate and kind of break down in the cantaloupe pulp kimchi, and then kind of created this Korean dish. And instead of putting kimchi in this soup that would normally go in there, we just put like a fruit. So I wasn't sure how the sweetness was going to go with the mussels, you know, like cantaloupe and mussels. Yeah, you got some weird combos going on coming out of that brain of yours, man. Like some of the stuff's like, wow, like I would, like, you know what I mean? You got some interesting flavor. I think that's combos. The one, like the thing. If it seems weird and people taste it and they're like, this tastes like Taco Bell, then I think I nailed it. Yeah. You know, like if it tastes like something that they don't understand what it is, but they eat it and it tastes like something familiar, then I think that's the goal. Yeah. For a lot of this stuff. Totally. I remember we did a dish once. Andrew did a dish, like his tomato risotto. He's like known for it now, right? And I was working Hot Apps, and he taught me how to make it, and I fell in love with it. And I still cook it today sometimes for different things, and it tastes like SpaghettiOs, but it's like you know, carnaroli rice, heirloom tomatoes, confit in oil. Like it's like this huge fucking 3-day process, right? Getting it there. But when you make it a la minute and you finish it with the mascarpone and everything, it tastes like, it just reminds me, I'm like, fuck, this is such a good dish. I love it. Right? And it's just a bowl, it's like a little bowl of rice.
And it sparks those like you're just intense food memories, And I'm like, you nailed it on this thing.
Yeah.
Right. I love that.
Because I mean, I think like that's special to a diner. I've made something that just random before. I don't remember specifically the dish, but this lady's like, this tastes like something my grandmother used to make for me.
Yeah.
Every time I went over. And then it's like, that's an emotional response for them. So it's cool for maybe every other person in the room doesn't get it, but like one person to get it and it be special to them that's another positive about working in like that open kitchen, because you
get direct feedback from people.
Yeah. And you can see like, sometimes it's hard because they're making faces and you don't know if they're good or bad. But then you like to hear like positive stuff like that makes it worth it. Like, the tough nights. Yeah.
So you've been working these wild menus for the past 2 years, and typically a Catbird Seat is kind of a rotating kind of chef that comes in over usually a 2-year period. So you're kind of coming towards the end of that tenure. Mm-hmm. What's next for you? What are your plans?
Well, I'd like to open something. I think that's kind of what I'm trying to figure out now is, what is that going to be? Where is that going to be? Everything that goes into that. Mm-hmm. I want it to be in Nashville.
Yeah. You like it here? This is home base?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. So the plan right now is something that's seafood driven still, but kind of exploring more of that like reactionary cooking.
Would your dream spot be a tasting menu restaurant like you're doing now, or was it?
Yeah, I would say tasting menu restaurant and even smaller than Catbird Seat.
Really?
Where I can.
How are you going to make money, Brian? Like, it's a business, right? You have two kids at home that need to eat.
I have.
They have to eat. They have to eat foie gras and caviar.
Yeah, I was actually going to open it in a broom closet, so rent's going to be cheap.
Nice.
No, I mean I have other plans with things that I'm thinking I can do to kind of balance that.
Yeah.
Make it one business.
Is that have you found that to be difficult? How much? I'm interested. One of the fears that I've had as a chef and restaurateur now is how are you guys profitable? How do you stay profitable? How does that work in that environment? Because I've always looked at it and like I've done the numbers in my head. I'm like, fuck, dude, like I'm not gonna be able to make any money doing this.
That's the thing is if
it's hard.
I think it makes more sense now for me. I think you're gonna see more small restaurants opening because of staffing issues.
Yeah.
If you can find the right space and it makes sense financially, I think it's easier to control your cost because you know how many people you're cooking for, how many people you have working for you. Mm-hmm. I don't have to bring in like 20 pounds of beef hoping that I don't know if they're going to order this and then I got to figure out how to use up 10 of it.
Right.
I know everybody gets
the same amount. You've got minimal waste. It's like
very minimal waste, and any waste is turned into something and utilized, so we're not just tossing things. So I think it's easier to control the costs in this kind of environment than it is, at least it was for me at Husk, because you just never knew what people were going to order. There'd be nights where like all the fish would get hammered. There'd be nights where like all the steaks would get hammered, and you couldn't tell.
Yep.
It wasn't like lunch where you knew you were going to just sell fried chicken and burgers all day long.
Yeah. There's a lot more like variables every day.
So I think there are positives. It's just how can you, making enough
to pay everybody,
getting the sales to get it right.
Right. It has to be of appropriate size to be able to like make all the numbers work.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. So I don't want to get into. We have you at least for another while at Catbird Seat. Nobody has to worry that like next week, you're gonzo.
Yeah.
All right. You still got some time left.
Yeah.
So great. And then what I want to do is I want to circle back and do another, because I feel like we just started getting comfortable and getting chatting.
Yeah.
And I want to have another conversation. Maybe after the season.
Cool.
Let's get to the season and then and kind of get back together and talk about. I know there's a move coming up with Catbird Seat that was announced recently that the restaurant's still going to operate, just moving to a new location.
Yep.
So that's going to happen in the not too distant future, which you'll be a part of.
Right.
right? Part of that switch. So yeah, maybe once we kind of get through all that kind of stuff, we can get back together and talk about where things are going.
Sounds good.
Anything else you want to talk about?
I don't think so.
You got going on?
Yeah.
All right.
We can talk about painting then too. I paint, but
Yeah.
It's
Let's
not-
talk about painting.
I like to paint.
Your paintings are pretty good, by the way. I was spying your Instagram.
Thanks.
Man, your shit's good, man.
Appreciate it. I'm
You've
not
got
gonna
some
do. I've been doing like some stuff for the hotel I used to work at in Orlando,
Cool.
and it's been very difficult. It took me 5 tries to get it right, and I still have to do one more hotel for them. And at that point, I don't think I'm gonna do any more
Commissions.
commission work for anybody because it's not fun. It takes the fun out of it. 'Cause
Right, 'cause
I don't
it's a
get to
job
just
now.
paint. I don't get to just paint.
Right. It's not
I
whatever.
have to
comes
try
out.
to do something, and it's how. And nothing against them. Like, it's very specific. Like,
Right.
there's a swan and a dolphin on top of 2 buildings, and if they don't look right,
Yeah.
then it's
start
not
over.
what it is.
Right.
I just want to be able to go outside, plein air, and just like paint something. So
Is
I
that
get
what you
frustrated
like to
because-
paint? Is what?
Yeah, I would say plein air painting. It's hard, but like there's nothing like I used to forge a lot with Jeremiah when I was at McCrady's, and there's something about being able to kind of get outside and just fresh air, kind of like connecting with everything, and just like kind of not having to think about anything else.
Is the painting for you a creative process or a therapeutic process?
I think it's both.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I don't want to say I'm a perfectionist, but I have the same attention to detail on it that I do with cooking, but I'm not as good at painting as I want to be. So it's hard for me to like what everybody sees and thinks is great, I think is terrible.
Yeah. I think that's just I think a lot of chefs are wired that way.
Yeah, maybe.
And I think painters too. My fiance is actually an amazing artist, and she's a painter. She also does like leather work and all this other shit. She's like super creative, and she like it's really hard to get her to show her work, let alone sell it.
Yeah.
And like, but she paints stuff, and I'm like, it blows my mind. 'Cause
Yeah.
I can't do that. And I'm like, wow, you are like hyper talented. She's like, it's not good. And I'm like, you are insane. Like normal people that aren't painters, look at shit like this and it blows their face off. They don't understand the magic of it, right?
Right. Yeah, they think it's so good, and I'm like, it looks like my son painted it, but I appreciate it.
It's really good. I've checked it out. I was like, damn, dude, you've got some skills.
Thanks.
Cool. Keep it up.
Appreciate it. Yeah, I'll try.
All right. Well, thanks, brother. Thanks for meeting with me. Good luck with everything coming up at Catbird, and I look forward to kind of circling back with you in half a year or so and talking about what's next.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Feel free to leave some comments or questions in the comments section, or you can hit us up on our Instagram page and leave some comments there. If there's anything you'd like for me to cover or people you'd like me to talk to, or if you just enjoy the show and want to let us know, that would be appreciated.